million seconds ago was just last week.
Right.
But a billion seconds ago was 1995.
It's a massive leap.
It really is. And today, we are going to explore why your brain is completely biologically incapable of understanding the difference between those two realities.
And, how that very specific evolutionary blind spot is currently hiding an $8 trillion bill with your name on it.
Exactly. It's the ultimate magic trick of modern society. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me back.
Of course. If you're listening right now, you already know we love taking dense, complex realities and, well, cracking them open.
We really do.
And today we have a mission. By the end of this conversation, we want to completely rewire how you perceive scale.
It's a big promise, but I think we can get there.
I think so too. We are taking the data from some deeply profound economic research, specifically this text called Why These Numbers Don't Feel Real and Why They Should.
Such a great piece of research.
It is. And we're pairing that with the very sobering, raw, military and financial data from today, April 29th, 2026.
Right, the current realities.
Yeah, and we are going to bridge the gap between those mind-boggling numbers you hear on the morning news and the actual physical, historical realities they represent.
But before we jump into those realities, I do want to establish a really firm ground rule for our conversation today.
Yeah, please do, because this gets heavy.
It does. The territory we are covering involves extreme wealth concentration, national debt, and of course, the active 2026 military conflict in the Middle East.
Right.
And these are intensely debated, highly politically charged issues. So our objective today is strictly impartial.
Right. We're not taking sides here.
Exactly. We are not here to advocate for a specific tax policy, and we are certainly not here to endorse or condemn any military strategy.
Absolutely not.
Our focus is entirely on the math. We're looking at the mechanics of how these systems operate and the psychological limitations we face when trying to comprehend them.
Yeah, we're just looking at the architecture of the numbers today.
Purely as a study in human cognition and economic scale.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, to do that, we have to start by tearing down the illusion that you and I, and all of us, really actually know how to count.
Which is a humbling place to start.
It is. Because we think we know how to count, right? You look at a table, you see 3 apples, your brain instantly knows it's 3.
Right, you don't even have to consciously count them.
Exactly. 1, 2, 3. It's automatic. You just know.
Well, that automatic recognition actually has a scientific name. It's called subitizing.
Subitizing.
Yeah. And from an evolutionary standpoint, early humans needed to be able to instantly recognize small quantities just for sheer survival.
Like spotting predators.
Exactly. If you walk into a clearing and see 1 lion, your brain reacts very differently than if you see 4 lions.
Obviously, yeah.
You need that information instantly to trigger the fight or flight response. So we are biologically hardwired to perfectly comprehend small numbers, usually up to about 5 or 6, in just a fraction of a second.
Right. But what happens when you walk into a clearing and there are, 10,000 lions?
Well, from an evolutionary perspective, it really doesn't matter if there are 10,000 or 40,000.
Right. The survival imperative is just, that is way too many lions. Run away.
Exactly. And that is why our brains naturally operate on a logarithmic scale when it comes to large quantities.
We compress them.
We do. We compress big numbers together to save mental energy. Once numbers surpass our immediate physical day-to-day experience, our brain just stops treating them as distinct, absolute values.
It just throws them into a giant mental bucket labeled lots.
Yes. 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion. To our primate brains, those aren't mathematically distinct concepts at all.
They're just synonyms for a huge amount.
Exactly.
Which is terrifying when you realize those are the exact numbers governing our entire society.
It really is a massive blind spot.
So let's break that logarithmic compression. Let's force the brain to see the actual physical distance between these numbers.
Okay, I love this exercise from the source material.
Right, the marbles. Okay, let's unpack this. If you're listening, picture a standard glass marble, just a normal everyday marble.
Got it.
Now, try to visualize exactly 1 million of those marbles in a pile.
See, most people, I ask this, they picture a large bathtub or maybe a small room filled ankle deep.
Yeah, I'd probably guess a hot tub.
But mathematically, 1 million average-sized marbles is enough to completely fill 5 standard yellow school buses.
5 school buses.
Floor to ceiling, front to back, packed tight against the windows. 5 entire school buses.
That is just a massive physical footprint.
It is.
And let's say you were tasked with counting them. Like you have to pick up each marble, verify it, and count it. One marble every single second.
Okay.
You don't sleep. You don't stop for a sip of water. You just count. 24 hours a day. It would take you 11 and a half days to count to 1 million.
Which is a grueling, hallucination-inducing week and a half.
Or you'd go crazy.
But it is a time frame your brain can actually grasp. You can remember what you were doing 11 and a half days ago. You can conceptualize that block of time.
Yeah, it's just last week. But this is where the language we use totally betrays us. We step up from a million to a billion.
Right, just one letter difference.
An M to a B. It sounds like the next logical step on a ladder, like going from step 3 to step 4.
It does sound like that. But to hold 1 billion marbles, you don't need 5 school buses.
You need 5,000 school buses.
5,000. Let's physically map that out for a second.
Please do.
A standard school bus is about 40 feet long. If you line up 5,000 of them, bumper to bumper, you are looking at a solid wall of yellow metal and glass stretching for nearly 38 miles.
38 miles.
That is a convoy stretching from downtown Los Angeles well past Orange County, completely packed with marbles.
It's just a solid line of buses. And the counting, oh man, the counting.
Right, the time aspect.
If you stand at the front of that 38-mile convoy and you start counting at that exact same rate, 1 marble per second, no sleeping, no eating, no breaks whatsoever.
Still just 1 a second.
Yeah. To count to 1 billion wouldn't take you weeks or even months. It takes over 31 years.
31 years. Think about what that actually means. You would start counting as a 9-year-old child in the 4th grade.
Right.
And you would not say the final number until you were 40 years old.
Your entire youth, your 20s, your 30s, gone.
Entirely consumed by just saying 1 number a second.
That is insane.
Yeah.
You start in the 4th grade, and by the time you finish, you might have your own kid in the 4th grade.
Exactly.
And yet, when we watch a news anchor say the new infrastructure bill will cost $4 billion, they say it with the exact same inflection as $4 million.
They do. Our society uses these words as if they are neighbors.
But one is a week and a half, and the other is an entire human lifetime.
And what's fascinating here is that this is the biological hurdle we absolutely have to clear to understand modern economics. A billion is not just a big million.
Right, it's not just more of the same.
It is a completely different dimension of scale. It is 1,000 millions stacked on top of each other.
Which just hurts the brain.
And it gets worse. When we escalate to a trillion, which is the word that dominates global economic policy right now, we are talking about 1,000 billions.
Oh, wow.
Or, to put it back in our timeline, 1,000,000 millions. If you counted to a trillion at 1 number per second, it would take you over 31,000 years.
31,000 years.
That predates recorded human history.
Okay, so this brings up a massive question for me. If our brains literally require these elaborate crutches like school buses, 30-year lifespans, 31 millennia, just to conceptualize what these numbers mean, how do we ever make rational decisions when these numbers show up in the real world?
That is the core problem.
Like, if we literally can't picture a billion without short-circuiting, aren't we essentially flying blind when we structure our economy around these figures?
We are absolutely flying blind, and that cognitive blind spot leads to severe miscalculations in public understanding. Well, when we lack the intuitive ability to feel the weight of these numbers, we lose our ability to appropriately react to them. The distance between an average household income and a mega billionaire's net worth, or the distance between a city's tax revenue and a federal war budget is so unfathomably vast that our brains just give up.
We just tap out.
Exactly. We enter a state of numerical numbness.
Numerical numbness. Okay, I want to test that numbness right now by taking this new, terrifying understanding of what a billion actually is and applying it to personal wealth.
It's the perfect application of the scale we just established.
Let's look at the modern economy as it stands today in 2026. Let's translate that 31-year time span back into daily human behavior.
Specifically, spending money.
Right, because wealth isn't just a number on a screen, it's the potential for action. It's purchasing power.
Exactly.
So let's create a hypothetical scenario. Let's say you have exactly $1 billion in cash, and you want to spend it. You decide to spend $1,000 every single day. $1,000 a day. You can stay in a penthouse, eat at Michelin star restaurants, buy bespoke clothing every single day. How long until you are broke?
Well, based on the text, at a rate of $1,000 a day, it would take you nearly 3,000 years to exhaust a $1 billion fortune.
3,000 years.
It's staggering.
You would have to start spending $1,000 a day during the Iron Age, before the Roman Empire even existed, just to run out of money today.
And you wouldn't even be making a dent in it for the first 2 millennia.
Right. You could buy a fleet of private jets, multiple private islands, and the principal amount would barely flinch.
And remember, that is just for a single billion.
Right.
But as we look at the financial data for 2026, the individuals at the very apex of the global economy are not playing with $1 billion.
Not even close.
The numbers have scaled logarithmically.
So let's lay out the current data for our listeners. As of spring 2026, the net worth of Elon Musk is hovering around $300 billion.
Right.
Jeff Bezos is sitting at roughly $200 billion. Mark Zuckerberg is around $180 billion. And figures like Peter Thiel, who operate with immense influence in the tech and defense sectors, are clearing well over $10 billion.
So let's apply our spending metric to those specific figures to maintain our grasp on the scale.
Okay, let's do the math.
If $1 billion takes 3,000 years to exhaust at $1,000 a day,
then Elon Musk's $300 billion would take roughly 900,000 to 1 million years to spend at that exact same rate.
1 million years.
1 million years of spending $1,000 every single day. Homo sapiens haven't even existed for 1 million years.
We are talking about geologic timeframes here.
It is an analogy that completely breaks the human capacity for historical thought.
It really does.
But wait, I have to push back here, because I can hear a savvy listener thinking right now, okay, but this is a slightly unfair representation.
How so?
Well, Musk doesn't have $300 billion in a giant Scrooge McDuck vault that he can just dive into.
Right, it's not liquid cash.
Exactly. He can't just go to an ATM and withdraw it. That wealth is almost entirely illiquid, right?
Yeah.
It's tied up in the stock valuation of Tesla, SpaceX, xAI, and so on.
That's correct.
So if he tried to sell all that stock tomorrow to get cash, the market would panic, the stock price would plummet, and that $300 billion would evaporate into thin air. So isn't comparing it to a daily spending allowance a bit of a false premise?
That is a highly sophisticated pushback, and you are entirely correct regarding the mechanics of market liquidity.
Okay.
It is paper wealth driven by market capitalization and future growth expectations. He absolutely could not liquidate it instantaneously without destroying the value of the asset itself.
Right. So the spending analogy falls apart.
Not quite. The reason the spending analogy remains crucial is not about the logistics of liquidation. It is about the scale of resource command.
Resource command, what do you mean by that?
Even if the wealth is illiquid stock, it acts as leverage.
Oh, like borrowing against it?
Exactly. Financial institutions will extend massive, practically limitless lines of credit against that stock. If you have $300 billion in equity, you can borrow billions in cash at incredibly low interest rates.
And you don't even have to sell the stock.
Right. You can use that borrowed cash to fund entirely new industries, buy global communication networks, or influence geopolitical events, all without ever selling a single share.
Wow.
So the specific form the wealth takes, whether it's stock versus cash, is just mechanics.
Right.
The fundamental reality is that the sheer mass of the valuation grants these individuals a level of economic gravity that functions almost like a sovereign state.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's like having the deed to a mountain made of gold.
That's a great way to put it.
You might not be able to chop the mountain up and sell it in a single afternoon, but simply possessing the deed means every bank in the world will bend over backwards to give you whatever you want.
Exactly. The gravity is real.
It is real.
And this brings us to an incredible linguistic analogy from the source material. When we use the word billionaire, we apply it equally to someone who has exactly $1 billion and someone who has $300 billion.
Which, as we established, is the difference between 3,000 years and 1 million years.
Right. So comparing a $1 billionaire to a $300 billionaire is fundamentally like comparing a backyard swimming pool to the Pacific Ocean and shrugging and calling them both bodies of water.
That is wild.
It's technically true, but utterly useless for understanding the reality of what you are dealing with.
Right. The language we use just completely fails to categorize them accurately.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that these individuals occupy a financial reality that is entirely removed from ordinary human experience.
And even removed from the experience of regular millionaires.
Completely.
It's a total failure of categorization. It's like calling a matchstick and a supernova both light sources.
Perfect analogy.
And this failure of scale doesn't just apply to individuals. This is where our deep dive pivots from the private sector to the public sector.
Yes, from individual wealth to national policy.
Because the exact same numerical numbness that prevents us from understanding extreme wealth also prevents us from understanding how our government operates.
This is the critical transition the text makes. When a society debates public policy, whether it's domestic infrastructure, taxation, healthcare, or international warfare, the sums of money debated in legislatures are on a scale that only those oceanic mega-billionaires could personally fathom.
Right. Those are the only human beings on the planet for whom these figures represent an actual personalized ledger.
Yet the financial burden of these policies does not rest on them. It inevitably lands on the collective shoulders of the general public.
So what does this all mean? Because the general public biologically cannot comprehend the scale of these numbers, a massive psychological phenomenon takes over.
A cloaking device engages.
A cloaking device. Let me walk you through how I'm thinking about this, and you tell me if the mechanics hold up. Go ahead.
Let's look at municipal spending versus federal spending. Imagine a small-town city council proposes a budget to repave a neighborhood park, and it's going to cost $50,000.
Okay, $50,000.
The citizens of that town will show up to the council meeting. They will be furious. They will demand to see the receipts for the asphalt. They will question the contractor's hourly rate. They will argue over every single line item.
Oh, absolutely.
And why do they do that? Because $50,000 is a number they intimately understand. It's a teacher's salary. It's a down payment on a house.
They have a tangible physical context for the value.
Exactly. They can feel the weight of it, so they aggressively police it.
Right.
But if the federal government steps up to a podium and casually announces a new defense initiative or an economic stimulus that will cost $8 trillion, our brains literally cannot process it.
The context is gone.
We don't have the context. We don't have the school buses. So instead of demanding receipts, we just kind of go, wow, that's a lot, and we change the channel.
Yeah. It seems like extreme scale acts as an unintentional cloaking device for government spending. If a policy costs $10,000, we argue over it. If it costs $8 trillion, our brains just shut down.
Your town hall analogy perfectly illustrates the core behavioral failure here. When a financial commitment exceeds our biological capacity to visualize it, we stop treating it as a tangible burden.
We just accept it as an abstract fact.
We treat an $8 trillion debt the same way we treat the distance to the sun. It's huge, it's out there, but it doesn't feel like it has anything to do with my daily commute.
But let me play devil's advocate here again, because we have to be rigorous.
Always.
Is comparing the federal budget to a town hall budget or a household checkbook fundamentally flawed?
How so?
Well, a household or a town has to bring in revenue through taxes or income to spend money. If they run out, they go bankrupt.
Right.
But the federal government, specifically the United States, is a sovereign issuer of its own fiat currency. It literally prints the money.
Yes, it does.
It can issue treasury bonds endlessly. It theoretically can't go bankrupt in its own currency. So if the government wants to spend $8 trillion, it just keystrokes it into existence at the central bank.
That's the mechanism.
Therefore, isn't the public actually right to not worry about it the way they worry about a $50,000 park? The mechanics of the debt are totally different.
That is the core argument of modern monetary theory, or MMT, and it is a vital mechanical distinction. A currency-issuing sovereign state does not balance a checkbook the way a household does. However, and this is where the cloaking device becomes incredibly dangerous, just because a government can generate the fiat currency does not mean the spending has no cost.
Okay, so where's the cost?
The cost is simply shifted from a direct bank account balance to the extraction of real-world resources and the dilution of purchasing power.
Right, because printing money doesn't print more steel, or more engineers, or more oil.
Exactly. When the government keystrokes $8 trillion into existence to fund a war or a massive project, it is forcefully redirecting the real physical resources of the economy.
Taking labor, materials, manufacturing capacity.
Yes, moving it away from the private sector and toward its own goals. The public pays for this not necessarily through an immediate tax hike on their paycheck, but through inflation as more dollars chase the same amount of goods.
And through the interest on the bonds.
Exactly, the compounding interest paid on the bonds issued to facilitate that spending. The anesthesia of scale tricks the public into thinking that because the government isn't physically reaching into their wallets for $8 trillion today, the cost isn't real.
But the cost is always paid.
It is always paid. It is just paid through complex macroeconomic mechanisms that take years to materialize.
That is a chilling realization. The bill always comes due, even if the currency is fiat.
It does?
And we don't have to look back to ancient history to see this cloaking device in action. We are living it right now.
Very much so.
We are broadcasting this on April 29th, 2026. The world is currently watching an active demonstration of unfathomable spending. And because the numbers are so big, we are barely processing the reality of the receipt.
Let's talk about Operation Epic Fury.
Let's do it. Let's lay out the facts of the conflict for anyone who might have tuned out the daily updates.
Okay, so let's strip away the geopolitical rhetoric and look purely at the mechanics of the economic expenditure and its cascading effects.
Operation Epic Fury was launched on February 28th, 2026. It is a joint U.S.-Israeli military operation against Iran.
Right.
And as of today, late April, we are sitting in a very fragile, nominal ceasefire.
The military objectives on paper were largely achieved.
Right, the near total destruction of Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, the crippling of their naval capabilities, and massive strikes on their nuclear infrastructure.
But diplomatic negotiations are completely stalled, and a vast U.S. naval blockade remains fully active.
So it's far from over. Now, let's look at the immediate financial visualization of this operation.
The Pentagon recently confirmed before Congress that the estimated upfront cost, just for the munitions expended, and the immediate logistical maintenance of the forces involved, sits at $25 billion.
$25 billion.
$25 billion. Let's ground that with our earlier metric.
Okay.
If someone spent $1,000 a day, it would take them 75,000 years to spend $25 billion.
Wow.
And we spent that in roughly 2 months.
It is an incredible burn rate of capital. It encompasses the cost of precision-guided munitions, the staggering fuel consumption of carrier strike groups and stealth bomber sorties, and the complex supply chains required to maintain a massive forward-deployed force.
Just astronomical costs.
But as vast as $25 billion is, it is merely the overt immediate receipt. The true cost of this operation is found in the macroeconomic shockwaves that it generated globally.
Right, because you don't drop bombs in one of the most critical energy corridors on the planet and just walk away with a clean receipt for the explosives.
Not at all.
Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz, because this is the most critical data point of 2026 so far. The Strait of Hormuz is a geographic bottleneck between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. It is only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point.
It's tiny.
It is. But historically, roughly 20 to 30% of the world's total global oil consumption passes through that narrow channel every single day.
It is the absolute jugular vein of the global energy supply.
And during the height of the active hostilities in March, global shipping through that strait collapsed by more than 90%.
90%. Let's unpack the mechanics of how a shipping lane actually collapses. Because it's not just because there are warships physically blocking the way, right?
Right. It's an economic mechanism.
It's driven by risk calculation and the insurance market.
Basically, the moment missiles start flying near commercial transit routes, maritime insurance syndicates like Lloyd's of London immediately skyrocket their premiums for war risk coverage.
So the cost to insure a multi-million-dollar oil tanker and its cargo becomes instantly prohibitive.
Exactly. Concurrently, major shipping conglomerates will order their fleets to halt or divert because they cannot risk the physical destruction of their assets.
So the ships don't just disappear, they stop or they turn around.
They reroute. Instead of passing through the Middle East, these massive tankers and cargo ships are forced to travel down the eastern coast of Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, and back up the western coast to reach Europe or the Americas.
Which takes forever.
This diversion adds weeks to the transit time. It consumes exponentially more bunker fuel. It totally fractures the carefully calibrated, just-in-time logistics of global trade.
And here is where you, the listener, actually feel the $25 billion war. Because that 90% collapse in the Strait of Hormuz isn't just an abstract headline.
No, it translates directly into reality.
It translates directly into the price of a gallon of gasoline in Ohio or the cost of diesel for a transport truck in Germany.
The cascade is immediate and compounding. Energy prices are the foundational input for nearly everything in the modern economy. When oil spikes due to a supply shock of this magnitude, it isn't just fuel that gets expensive, it is agricultural fertilizer, which relies heavily on petrochemicals. It is the cost of operating tractors.
Right, the food supply.
It is the cost of manufacturing plastics. It is the cost of flying cargo across the Pacific. The initial military action acts as a catalyst, triggering a massive inflationary shockwave that ripples through every sector of the global economy.
And the terrifying part is that this shockwave has an incredible lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there is a nominal ceasefire right now in late April, those supply chains are totally
It
broken.
don't just snap back.
It takes months, sometimes years, to realign global shipping and stabilize the insurance markets. We will be paying a hidden tax on every good we purchase, a premium created by epic fury long after the conflict fades from the front pages.
This is exactly how massive scale obscures reality. The public focuses on the $25 billion Pentagon figure, assuming that is the boundary of the costs.
But it's not.
They do not calculate the trillions of dollars in global economic drag caused by the disruption. And furthermore, epic fury is only one theater of operation.
Oh, right. We have to account for the simultaneous ongoing defense commitments globally.
Epic fury didn't happen in a vacuum.
No, as we sit here today, the United States is concurrently funding massive deterrence and assistance programs for Ukraine to counter Russian aggression.
At the exact same time.
Simultaneously, the U.S. is maintaining a heavily reinforced, highly active military posture in the Indo-Pacific, specifically conducting continuous operations near the Philippines and Taiwan to deter regional adversaries there.
It's an unprecedented era of simultaneous resource allocation.
We're essentially running a multi-front global defense grid, all of which requires a ceaseless river of capital.
A ceaseless river.
So, based on our earlier discussion of scale, isn't that $25 billion just the tip of a very, very deep iceberg?
It absolutely is.
Like, we see the $25 billion for the bombs and planes right now. We see the global inflation from the shipping collapse. But if we truly understand how these systems work, what happens to the math when the shooting actually stops?
That is the most vital question we can ask, because when we analyze the historical economic data of warfare, a terrifying pattern emerges.
What's the pattern?
The cessation of hostilities is merely the end of the overt spending phase. What follows is the long-tail cost. And history proves, unequivocally, that the long-tail cost is vastly more expensive than the war itself.
Let's dive into the final phase of our deep dive today, the hidden long-tail costs of conflict.
This is crucial.
This is where we look at the ghost bills that haunt economies for decades, sometimes centuries, after the treaties are signed.
When we examine the long-term economics of conflict, the costs generally bleed out through three primary channels: debt interest, veteran care, and entitlements.
Okay, debt interest, veteran care, and entitlements.
These are the structural mechanisms that guarantee a war is never actually over when the shooting stops. Let's begin with the most economically catastrophic example in recent history, the post-9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
According to the Costs of War project at Brown University, which is the gold standard for this data, the total economic cost of the post-9/11 wars is currently estimated at over $8 trillion.
8 trillion, 8,000 billions. To bring back our marbles, that is 40 million school buses.
40 million school buses. It's a number so large it crushes the mind.
It really does.
But what is truly staggering isn't just the size of the number. It is the mechanics of how we funded it. Because as you pointed out earlier, it wasn't funded by reaching into our wallets.
No, it was funded through the ultimate debt trap.
Tell me about that.
To understand this, we must look at a critical policy divergence. Historically, when a nation mobilized for a massive multi-year conflict, it instituted sweeping tax increases.
Like during World War II.
Exactly. During World War II, the United States fundamentally restructured its tax kind, massively broadening the income tax base. The public intimately felt the financial burden of the war in real time.
Right. Everyone felt it.
War bonds were sold, yes, but taxation was the primary engine.
But that is not what happened after 2001.
No, it is not. The post-9/11 wars were unique in modern history because they were funded almost entirely by deficit spending, borrowed money.
Borrowed money?
And crucially, this massive influx of borrowing was paired with historic tax cuts.
Which seems totally counterintuitive.
The Bush tax cuts of 2001 and 2003 reduced the revenue coming into the Treasury exactly at the moment the government began burning trillions of dollars overseas.
Let's make sure the mechanics of this are crystal clear for everyone. We decided to fight a 2-decade-long war on multiple fronts. We put the entire cost of the military hardware, the logistics, the nation building on the national credit card.
Right.
And at the exact same time, we told the public, hey, we're actually going to take less money from you.
That is the exact mechanism. And the mathematical consequence of funding a war entirely through debt is compounding interest.
Right.
When the government issues a treasury bond to borrow money for a war, it promises to pay the purchaser a yield interest over a set period. If you borrow trillions of dollars, the interest alone becomes a monumental sum.
And the data on this is just jaw-dropping. Over $1 trillion in interest has already been paid on the money borrowed to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan.
$1 trillion.
That money didn't buy a single armored vehicle. It didn't pay a single soldier's salary. It didn't build a single school in Kabul. It simply serviced the debt.
It's pure financial friction, and the projections are incredibly grim because the principal amount was never paid down, the debt continues to roll over and compound.
So it just keeps growing.
Yes. By the year 2030, economists project that the cumulative interest payments alone will equal and eventually surpass the initial multi-trillion-dollar cost of fighting the wars themselves.
Wait, really? We will literally pay more for the privilege of borrowing the money than we paid for the actual wars.
That is the projection, yes.
It is an inescapable financial loop. But debt is just the first channel. The second channel is the human cost. And this is where the timeline of a war truly stretches out.
Yes. Let's talk about lifelong care.
When a nation sends hundreds of thousands of men and women into combat zones characterized by traumatic brain injuries, amputations, and exposure to toxic environments like burn pits, it is entering into an implicit, lifelong financial contract with those individuals.
Absolutely. The medical and disability costs are a permanent fixture of the national budget.
The projections indicate that the United States will spend an additional $2.2 to $2.5 trillion through the year 2050 on medical care and disability compensation just for the veterans of the post-9/11 conflicts.
$2.5 trillion. And the most vital demographic reality to understand here is the aging curve.
The aging curve.
The highest costs for veteran care do not occur in the immediate aftermath of the war. They peak decades later.
Right. Let's trace the life cycle of a soldier to understand why that happens. Imagine a 20-year-old soldier who deployed to Fallujah in 2004. They survive. Maybe they have some hearing loss, some joint degradation from carrying heavy gear, and perhaps mild trauma from a concussive blast.
A very common profile.
In their 20s and 30s, their bodies are resilient. They might need occasional VA care, but the cost is relatively low.
But biological reality eventually catches up. When that veteran reaches their 60s, which for our hypothetical soldier will be in the 2040s, those dormant injuries compound with the natural aging process.
Right. The body just breaks down.
The joint degradation requires knee replacements. The concussive blasts manifest as severe neurological issues. The exposure to toxic burn pits develops into aggressive late-stage cancers.
Which requires immense, continuous, high-level medical intervention.
And vastly increased disability payouts.
That makes perfect sense. The human body breaks down, and the bill comes due 40 years after the combat ended. The war is totally absent from the public mind, but the financial reality of caring for those who fought it reaches its absolute maximum peak half a century later.
And this demographic pattern is undeniable. We can see it clearly by looking back at the Vietnam and Korean Wars.
Right, the historical precedent.
The Vietnam War ended with the fall of Saigon in 1975. The total estimated cost of that war, adjusted to $2025, was roughly $1.6 trillion.
But the VA is still writing massive checks for it today.
The Department of Veterans Affairs currently pays billions of dollars annually in disability compensation directly related to Vietnam. Specifically, this is driven by the ongoing multi-generational medical legacy of chemical defoliants like Agent Orange.
Let's explain that mechanism because it's a perfect example of a hidden cost. Agent Orange was sprayed to clear jungles.
Right.
Decades later, the VA establishes presumptive conditions. They acknowledge that if you served in certain areas and later developed Parkinson's disease, or certain types of leukemia or type 2 diabetes, they presume it was caused by the chemical exposure.
Because these diseases have massive latency periods.
Exactly. Veterans are developing them 40 or 50 years later, triggering brand new disability claims today for a war that ended in the 70s.
Exactly. The chemical legacy guarantees the financial ledger remains open. And if we look at the Korean War, we see a different kind of long-tail cost.
What's that?
It is what historians sometimes refer to as the forgotten bill.
Because the war never actually ended.
Precisely. The 1953 armistice merely halted the active combat operations. It did not resolve the conflict. As a direct result, the United States has maintained a permanent, heavily armed garrison of roughly 28,500 troops in South Korea ever since.
Let's think about the math of that. maintaining bases, rotating tens of thousands of troops, updating missile defense systems, running massive joint military exercises. We have been paying that bill year after year, decade after decade, for over 70 years.
It's immense.
It is a continuous operational cost stemming from a geopolitical decision made during the Truman administration. It's an endless subscription.
It is the geopolitical reality of forward deterrence. But if you want to explore the ultimate extreme of how long a war actually lasts, we must look at the third channel: entitlements and survivor benefits.
Survivor benefits, okay.
Let's look at World War II.
The cost of World War II was approximately $5.9 trillion, adjusted for inflation. It mobilized the entire global economy. It ended in 1945. Most of the veterans of that war have passed away. You would assume the ledger is finally closed.
It is mostly paid, but it is not entirely closed. The United States government still pays hundreds of millions of dollars annually in survivor benefits.
Survivor benefits, how does that work exactly?
When a veteran passes away from a service-connected disability or under certain other conditions, their surviving spouse, and sometimes dependent children, are legally entitled to receive financial compensation from the government for the rest of their lives.
Okay, I follow.
Because some veterans married younger spouses later in life, those spouses can outlive the veteran by decades, continuously drawing the benefit.
Which leads us to what is objectively the most mind-bending historical fact from the text. I mean, it completely shatters my perception of time.
It is a wild fact.
We've talked about Iraq, Vietnam, Korea, World War II. Let's go all the way back to the American Civil War. The war between the Union and the Confederacy.
The conflict that defined the 19th century.
The war with muskets and cannons. The Civil War ended in 1865. The United States government only stopped paying the final pension for a child of a Civil War veteran in the year 2020.
2020, just 4 years ago.
Let's break down the mechanics of how that is even biologically possible, because it sounds like science fiction.
It really does.
You have a Civil War veteran. Let's say he fights in the 1860s. He survives. Fast forward to the 1920s or 1930s. The Great Depression hits.
Right.
This veteran is now an incredibly old man, maybe in his 80s or 90s. He has a guaranteed, steady government pension because of his service.
Which was a vital economic lifeline during the Depression.
Exactly. So this 80-something-year-old veteran marries a very young woman, perhaps someone in her late teens or early 20s, who is desperate for financial security during the economic collapse.
Right.
They have a child. That veteran dies shortly after. The young widow collects the survivor benefit for decades, living into the late 20th century.
And then the child.
And that child, born in the 1930s to an 80-year-old Civil War veteran, grows up, grows old, and lives until the year 2020.
Because that child had certain physical or mental dependencies recognized by the VA from an early age, they qualified to receive the veteran's dependent pension for their entire life.
It is a remarkable chain of demographic and legal events,
Yeah.
but it proves the absolute permanence of the financial commitment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It totally rewrites how we view history. We think of war as an event. It has a start date, it has an end date, there's a treaty signed on a desk somewhere, and then it goes into a textbook and it's over.
That's the illusion. But financially, based on the mechanics of debt, lifelong care, and survivor benefits, war isn't an event. It is a permanent subscription. Every major U.S. war except the Revolutionary War has permanently marked the national debt.
This raises an important question, and it brings us to a crucial synthesis of everything we've explored today. A war is never just a line item on a spreadsheet.
It's a generational burden.
It is a massive, multi-generational debt that is serviced long after the cameras move on to the next crisis. But because the numbers are so vast, because $8 trillion or $1 trillion in pure interest are figures that our human brains biologically fail to process, we simply don't feel the weight of it.
It's the cloaking device we talked about.
It is the ultimate cloaking device. This psychological anesthesia allows the cycle of hidden generational debt to continue entirely unchecked.
We just let it happen.
We watch the news today in 2026. We see the $25 billion upfront cost of an operation like Epic Fury, and we accept it because it sounds like a finite, self-contained number.
But we're completely blind to the rest of it.
We are completely blind to the cascading inflation, the compounding interest, and the century of medical and survivor costs that will inevitably follow it. We commit to the action without ever comprehending the true scale of the reaction.
We just can't see the iceberg. We see the ice cube on the surface, and we steer the ship right into it.
Well said.
Wow. Okay. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. If you've been listening, we have taken you on a massive structural journey of scale.
We cover a lot.
We started with the evolutionary biology of a jar of marbles, realizing that counting to 1 billion would consume 31 years of your life.
And that's just 1 billion.
Right. We waded into the unfathomable oceans of extreme wealth, realizing that $1 billion is functionally a rounding error to the titans commanding the 2026 economy.
The pool versus the ocean.
Exactly. And finally, we tracked those totally incomprehensible numbers down into the multi-trillion-dollar ghost bills of human conflict. We learned the mechanics of the debt trap, and we realized that we were all locked down during the pandemic in 2020.
We have mapped the very boundaries of human comprehension today, and we have seen how dangerous it is when our systems outgrow our biology.
We really have. And my ultimate hope is that the next time you see the word billion or trillion flash across a headline or a policy proposal, you won't let your brain automatically compress it.
Don't let it become invisible.
Exactly. I hope you pause, you picture those 5,000 school buses stretching into the distance, and you demand to understand the actual physical weight of what that number means for you and your future.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something that builds on the mechanics of cognition we've discussed today, but let's even further ahead.
I'd love to hear it.
If the human brain is fundamentally biologically unequipped to understand the scale of modern national debt, if we cannot naturally comprehend trillion-dollar wars or the gravity of mega-wealth without short-circuiting, how might a future society have to completely reinvent its language or completely restructure its numbering systems to forcefully break that cloaking device and make us actually feel these costs before we commit to them?
Oh, wow. That is exactly the kind of question that will keep you awake tonight staring at the ceiling. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the numbers and keep digging beneath the surface.